Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for opening up this amazing facility and what you do in the community. Thank you for that. So we have been going around and looking at excessive wasteful spending. And I think when people thought that we started this, we were just going to tail off and we weren't going to be in a position where we're going to continue doing this. But I am hell-bent, for the lack of a better word, of making sure that we bring fiscal responsibility and fiscal sanity back to a lot of local governments, because we know that affordability is a big issue and there's no better way to help deliver on the promise of affordability, help deliver on the promise of a Florida that offers opportunity, than to keep taxes low and put more money back in the pockets of Floridians. So to any of the naysayers or apologists, if you thought I was going away, think again. From deep red Flagler County to deep blue Broward County and all of the cities and counties in between, we are holding local governments responsible for their reckless, excessive, and I would say needless spending. So far to date, we have exposed more than $3.1 billion in excessive, wasteful, and needless spending, and that includes the city of Jacksonville. When we were there 2 years, or last year, we said that they accounted for $199 million of wasteful spending in the fiscal year 24-25. We were there last week with the new and I would say unimproved number of $275 million in the last fiscal year. Orange County in the 2024-25 wasted $190 million of your tax dollars and another $300 million last year alone. City of Orlando wasted $22 million. Hillsborough County, $278 million. Broward County, $189 million. Manatee County, $112 million. Miami-Dade County in 24-25, we were just there last week. We announced $302 million in wasteful, excessive, and needless spending in the 24-25 fiscal year. Last year, or this year, I would say that they shot up to $470 million in excessive and wasteful spending. City of Miami, $94 million. Nassau County, $53 million. Alachua County, $84 million. Seminole County, $40 million. City of St. Pierce, $10 million. St. Petersburg, $49 million. Citrus County, $39 million. Flagler County, $59 million. St. Lucie County, $46 million. And we were here last year announcing that Palm Beach County has wasted needlessly and excessively spent $344 million of your tax dollars. Now, I want to point out, because I know that some of the people online and some of the media outlets, not necessarily the news outlets, but the opinion writers, say that this is a partisan exercise. It is not. This is a protecting the taxpayer exercise. If you go through those jurisdictions, you will see a lot of blue jurisdictions, a lot of red jurisdictions. In fact, included in that amount is the city of Orlando, which wasted, in our estimation, $22 million of taxpayer dollars. But on a percentage basis, they are actually the best one out of all of that group. So our methodology works. Anyone who says that it doesn't is just trying to point you away from the fact that local governments are just taking your money and spending it. Affordability is a big issue, and property taxes is a big part of affordability. The fact of the matter is Palm Beach County government, in our estimation, has been spending your money like drunken sailors, and Palm Beach County is just drowning in excessive and wasteful spending. When government spends needlessly, it creates problems for our families and our businesses, especially our small businesses who are trying to get a leg up in this environment, in an environment where corporations are dominating the business landscape. Palm Beach County did not only heed the warning of a tax revolt because of wasteful spending, they doubled down on the wasteful and excessive spending. Local government, unfortunately, is growing faster than the taxpayers' ability to pay for it. It should be obvious by now that local government will not stop growing and not stop spending recklessly unless acted upon by the taxpayers. And that's why property tax reform that is hitting the ballot this November is very important. People cannot continue to raise people's taxes. They cannot continue to raise people's costs of living and at the same time complain about affordability issues. That does not make you someone who cares about your constituents. That makes you a hypocrite. We applied the same methodology as we did in Palm Beach County's 2025-2026 budget as we did the last time that we were here when we exposed $344 million of wasteful, excessive, and needless spending on behalf of the local government here. Now, in order to find out how much money Palm Beach County government is wastefully and excessively spending, we need to figure out what the budget should reasonably be under normal circumstances and then compare it to what it actually is. We do that by applying what we would call the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, or FAFO methodology, which is the same that states like Colorado and Utah use in order to keep governments accountable and, more importantly, cost less, fiscally responsible. You know, it starts off with the premise that government should never, ever grow faster than inflation plus population, because if it does, it will outpace the taxpayer's ability to pay for it. It is kind of common sense. The larger the government grows, the more it is going to collect. And if the government grows past what the private sector growth is, government is going to tax more than it actually needs to be. It's a very simple but yet profound calculation. Anything over inflation and population means they overcollected on taxes, they overtaxed, and then they overspent. I want everyone to look at this board because I know some of the big government apologists, some of the bureaucrats, some of the politicians who don't like me and us criticizing their overspending. Just know that I have the back of the taxpayers. They are making it more affordable. So everyone criticizes our methodology, but our methodology is sound, and here's some proof to it. This is a quote from the James Madison Institute, which is one of the think tanks, if you will, that sort of track affordability, track taxation. At the James Madison Institute, we believe the FAFO methodology, similar to what has been used in states like Colorado and Utah, is one of the most effective tools to demonstrate the need for tax relief for Floridians to rein in government spending. And that is the key, to rein in government spending. I want everyone to think of us coming here and shining the light on excessive and wasteful spending as not only a tool for people to use, taxpayers to use, to show how large government has become, how much it is taxing, how much it is charging everyone, but also a return to fiscal sanity. Because it was not long ago where a lot of governments were actually not growing faster than inflation and population. We were just in Jacksonville, and we compared the last 6 years of Jacksonville budget, and we split it up into 2 3-year sections. The 3 years under Mayor Curry, and this was just an example, this is just math. The 3 years under Mayor Curry, they were under inflation and population for 3 straight years. The last 3 years, not only were they over inflation and population, they were really over inflation and population, to the tune of last year they excessively spent and overtaxed their residents by $275 million. So we took, for this exercise, we took the 2019-2020 fiscal budget and we indexed it forward for inflation and population plus growth to find out what the budget should reasonably be in 2026. Take the budget 29-2020, add for inflation and population, and we've also added what we would call a buffer for some of these large. Add the buffer to find out where the budget should be and then compare it to what it actually is. Anything over inflation and population and the buffer is money that should have never been collected. It should have never been spent. But it's unfortunate that the local governments are taking this money. They are spending it needlessly, recklessly, and it's just a fact of the matter. So this is what the math looks like here in Palm Beach County. Now, I know that we've had local elected officials and bureaucrats here in Palm Beach County the last time we were on site saying that, like, break down the numbers for us, and we did. But just so everyone is clear, to be as open and transparent how we do this as possible, here is the actual calculations. I would ask all the news outlets in the back to take pictures of this. So what we did, this is the FAFO methodology specifically for Palm Beach County, for this county. We took the 2019-2020 budget and we indexed forward, adding 25.5% inflation. That is the inflation number, CPI, over the last 6 years. We also included an extra 5.11% for population growth. Again, adding for inflation and population growth. And then we actually added a 5% government inefficiency buffer on top of that. Now, local jurisdictions 5, 6, 7 years ago were under inflation plus population. Remember that. So not only these governments growing over and above inflation and population, they are growing over and above inflation and population, and we are actually being good to them and actually giving them a little bit more money in for our calculations in the form of a 5% budget. And they blew right past the number. We think that their budget should have increased over the last 6 years, 35.61%, and their budget actually increased 65.2%. So now, to put that in context, just to go to show you what the 5% budget buffer actually does. Inflation plus population plus an extra $74.7 million. That's the buffer that we gave them. And they still blew past inflation, population, and the buffer. That buffer equates to $74.7 million. Now, the budget actually went up 65.26, which means the new updated wasteful and excessive spending number for 2026 blew past the $344 million last year, and the number is $443 million. Again, inflation plus population plus the buffer is what we believe it should have been. This is not a crazy number, because many governments were under inflation and population. The fact of the matter is they took all the property tax revenue, they took it, never once thought about giving it back to the taxpayers, and they just took it and expanded government. They went over that indexed value by $443.2 million. So, I also want to be crystal clear about this. When we say that we're adding for inflation and population and the extra buffer, this is important, because the big government apologists and the people who are going out hitting the airwaves now saying that they cannot afford a property tax cut without cutting services, I'm sure you all heard it. The parade of horribles that come with it. When we index forward saying that we are adding for inflation and population growth and the buffer, we are accounting for increased fire and law enforcement. We are accounting for raises for employees. We are accounting for increased costs of government. So when we go through this exercise, all of that stuff is accounted for. And Palm Beach County wastefully, excessively, and needlessly spent $443 million more than what we think that they actually needed to run government. Now, they're going to say that, again, the numbers don't make sense. They make sense. They're going to say that we're not being transparent with the numbers. There are the numbers. They're going to say that it doesn't make any sense because they need all that extra money for all the population that is coming in. Nope, we've already accounted for that also. There's only one answer, and the answer, unfortunately, is they don't want anybody holding them accountable for the reckless, wasteful spending. That, unfortunately, is the only answer. They took all of that extra property tax revenue and never once thought about giving it back to you, the taxpayers, in the form of a property tax cut. Now, if Palm Beach County just cut out that $443 million of wasteful, excessive, and needless spending, because I think we're sort of proving here that they didn't need to do it, they didn't need all the extra money, and let's be clear, the only reason why they got that extra money is because property values started spiking. Property values started spiking, property tax receipts started spiking. Government took all of that extra money and just spent it, never thinking about you guys, okay? Answer this question. What happens if property taxes didn't spike and they didn't have all this extra money? Government would have grown commensurate with inflation and population, because that's how governments have historically grown with that. The only reason why they have it is because government sort of got lucky. They got lucky, you got unlucky. You got unlucky because the people in this county have a government who just took the extra money and just spent it, and they're continuing to spend it. We were on site last year announcing $344 million in wasteful and excessive spending. So what did they do? They had an opportunity. We said, hey, you guys are growing way too fast. You're collecting way too much money. So what was their response? To collect and waste more, $443 million. And this is why tax reform is very, very important, because if the people do not rise up and say that you are collecting way too much money, you are making things unaffordable here in Palm Beach County, they're not going to stop. Let's think about this. If we didn't get tax reform, and look, do I think tax reform is going to pass? Yes, I do. Because I think it is such a big issue here in the state of Florida that people are going to vote their own property tax cut because they know inherently that the local governments are taking and wasting all of this money. But what happens if it doesn't? You think this number of $443 million is going to go up or down next year? You guys are laughing and giggling because I think we all know what the answer is. What will that number be next year? $600 million? What will be the number after that? $750 million? Government is not going to stop spending until the people start saying that they've had enough. We've had this same thing happen in the mid-2000s, where we had a rise in property values, or a corresponding rise in property taxes. They took all of that extra revenue and they took it, they spent it, and they expanded government. And the people rose up then and said, nope, we want an additional homestead exemption. And that's how we got from 25 to 50. The government didn't learn. Taxpayers know that they are being overcharged for the services. The budget here went up 65.26%. How many here had their own salaries or their own income go up 65% over the last 6 years? I hear a lot of giggles, a lot of laughing, but it's true. Why should government be the beneficiary of taking in all that extra income off of the people who don't even get the same commensurate increase in their own salary, in their own family finances? To me, this is a choice. You're either with the side of government or you're with the side of the taxpayers. Because there's only a finite amount of money to go around. I would much rather have that money in the hands and the pocketbooks and the wallets and the purses of people in this county, not in the government. You guys are the arbiters of what is best for you and your families, not government. If your taxes went up 100% to 200% over the last 6 years, did your services go up 200 to 300%? Did your lives get better because of all of the extra taxation that's going on in this county? I would probably say not. And that's why it's important that we let people know what's going on. You all knew that something was going on here in this county. Everyone inherently knows the amount of taxation that's going on and the amount of waste. And then people are going to come out and they're going to say, hey, and I've had news outlets ask me these same questions on air. Who do we believe? Do we believe the CFO of the state of Florida, who has the backs of the taxpayers, saying that your local government is overtaxing, overspending, and taking more money than they actually need, and that's why your property taxes are going up? Or are you going to believe the career politicians and the bureaucrats who say, nope, they have no idea what they're talking about? You know who you believe? Your property tax bill. Because when you see it, and you have to pay it, and your escrow account on your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment on your mortgage payment starts going up and doubling because you have to, you have to reclaim all the money that they put out, and then you have to catch up on top of it. You know, people know When you're sitting there and you don't have an opportunity to pay for your medication, or look at the increased prices of groceries these days. I mean, in my family, I know this sounds weird, I'm the one who actually shops a lot for the groceries, so I know the prices. So when you're sitting there and you realize that the government is charging you more than you actually need to be, and you have to go out and you have to feed your family, who's creating the affordability issue? I would say it's more government. And that's important. So that 344 million, we believe, I'm sorry, 443 million. Sorry, I almost gave him a discount there. We believe belongs in the hands of the taxpayers. So if Palm Beach County truly cared about the residents and truly wanted to make things more affordable, they would give that 443 million back to the people in the form of a substantial tax cut and not fight against property tax reform. Let me be also clear, is that anyone who is out there saying that they are against giving money back to people in the form of a tax cut is what they're actually saying. What I hear is they are against making things more affordable for the people here in the state of Florida. That's what I hear. And here's some free consulting advice for some of these elected officials. That's what your constituents hear also. They're saying, what they are hearing is that they don't care enough for me to make things more affordable and make my lives easier here in the state of Florida. That's what they hear. Trust me on that. In fact, all you have to do to see that is a lot of these news outlets, a lot of the print media and online media will post stories. I've seen it. It has happened nonstop over the last 2 weeks. And a lot of them, not necessarily right-leaning, more left-leaning, they will say that, they'll write opinion pieces and say that property tax reform is bad and government needs basically to keep all this money, or you should vote against property tax reform. I've never seen anything like this. I've seen this happen twice in all of my 30 years in Florida. Once in the mid-2000s when we had the same thing, the rise in property values and rise in property taxes, and today. About 3,000 comments where 90% of them are saying, no, we want a property tax cut, because it is the biggest issue going on. Now, 10% will say, no, we think government should keep all this money. The only thing I can figure is that 10% actually works for government. But it is a big issue. If they just cut out this $443 million of excessive and wasteful spending, Palm Beach County could lower the millage rate by 0.96 mils, almost by a full mil. So when they're saying that they can't make cuts, totally disagree with them. Totally disagree with them. They can actually cut property taxes by a full mil and not affect services. How do we know that it's not going to affect services? Because when we index for inflation and population, again, we add for extra fire, extra police, employee raises, increased costs. Everything that a government would function on, we've already indexed and already did that. So, real terms, just as an example, if you have a tax-assessed house, I think the median price in Palm Beach County is around $560,000, I want to say, somewhere around there. So if you own a home that is tax-assessed at $600,000, you will save about $577 a year. Now, a lot of local bureaucrats, politicians will scoff at that number and say it's not enough. It's not that big of a deal. But the people who are trying to make ends meet, the single mom out there working 2 jobs, the husband and wife working 2 jobs, maybe one is a teacher, maybe one is a fireman. That money helps. Every dime, every dollar of a property tax cut that goes back in the pockets of Floridians, specifically here in Palm Beach County, that matters. That helps with affordability. Local governments should not scoff at that number. And remember, that is real money going into the pockets of Floridians, not in the pockets of government. And also remember that 433 is astounding. This number is the headline. This number is shocking. Now, everything that we have been doing is we've been comparing the last 6 years, and there's a reason. because governments have started to explode post-COVID. So when you add up all of the excessive and wasteful spending over the last 6 years in Palm Beach County, your local government has wasted $1.23 billion. That is money that has been collected that they did not need to collect in our estimation to run local government. This is the amount over and above inflation, population, and the 5% buffer over the last 6 years. That is an astonishing number. That is an eye-popping number. The bigger question is what happens if you don't stop local governments from doing this? One of the things that I am worried about as your CFO is making sure that we do not New York or Florida. The last thing we want here is the level of regulations, the level of taxation that we have in New York or other areas of the state. You can't come here and do that to the people of the great state of Florida. You just can't. And here's the other thing. I'm sure you drive around town and you see a lot of things that government should be doing, but they don't. They say they need more money for, or they might even contemplating raising taxes in order to pay for some of this stuff. They just wasted $1.2 billion. How many roads could have been resurfaced? How many public works projects where they could go and fix flooding in certain areas? How many more fire could they have hired? How many more police could they have hired if they not waste $1.2 billion? Because remember, in a normal market, in a normal environment, that money would have never been collected. Here's the other thing, and this is your local government. I'm going to tell you what they're going to say, because they're not unlike any other local government who's gone through this exercise. They're going to say, it is impossible to hold government in check where it only increases by inflation and population. They're going to say it. I can predict what they're going to say. But you know what? If Palm Beach County just returned to the Palm Beach County of 4 years ago or 5 years ago, you will find out that Palm Beach County in the years 2021 and 2022 and more. I don't know if local here, are they looking at a property tax increase at here at all, or a sales tax increase? Some governments are taking all this extra money and then they still want more on top of it. Because it's the easiest thing to run a campaign and try to get the taxpayers to believe that they're voting in their best interest to raise taxes. I'm going to tell you right now, it is probably, most definitely, in the voters' best interest to vote for property tax reform, because I know the property tax owners and tax payers in the state have had enough. It is important to know that property taxes are not going up because of essential services. I think we've proved that today. It is not going up because the amount of population commensurate to their budget. It is going up because of excessive, wasteful, and needless spending by career politicians who think that you guys are an endless ATM. And that's why property tax reform is on the ballot this year. Let me be clear in closing. We would not be here today if local governments shown some fiscal restraint. If your local government was spending over inflation and population by 20, 30, $40 million, no one would bat an eye at it. Nobody would think twice. The problem is, for local governments, is that people are looking at their property tax bills and they're seeing how large their government is growing. They see how much they're being taxed compared to where they were 5 or 6 years ago. And they're not getting anything extra out of it. And they know there's an affordability issue. And if you're like me, when I do go shopping in the aisles at the grocery store, and I see the increased prices, and I get agitated at those prices, to know that the government is taking my money to prevent me from paying those increased prices, that gets me a little bit angry. So with that, I want to thank you for coming here today and continuing to show up for the taxpayers. Just know that from now up until when I'm out of this job 8 years from now, I'm going to continue to hold taxpayers. I'm always going to hold government accountable and side with the taxpayers. I will continue to be an advocate for you, not only in Tallahassee, but in your local governments. So with that, more than happy to answer any questions from the press. Yes. What outlet are you from? Sun Sentinel? Yes, ma'am.
My question is, Public Administrator Aborda has an outstanding public records request to your office. Last time that I spoke to him, regarding methodology, calculation, analysis, communications, etc., that were used to determine the figures expressed in December in West Palm Beach, the $344 million, which I'm sure now it would be the figure that is now. So my question is, and they brought this up again when you guys asked for the reserve information, why hasn't that request been fulfilled, and can they expect anything from that timeline? That's been something that they've discussed.
So I know the office is, we get inundated with public records requests, so we take them in as a first in, first out. So I do not know where it is, but we can answer that question for him right now. I'm sure you got a cell phone. You can take a picture of that. You can text it to Joe Abruzzo and say, here's the methodology. It's the same thing. So look, the bottom line is that this is deflection. The bottom line is that they spent way too much. They took in way too much. So they can ask for all the calculations all they want, and they may try to disagree. You know, it's funny because some of the things that Palm Beach County government has said didn't make any sense. They're like, well, their first response was, well, you can't use CPI in order for these calculations. Last time I checked, if you had Social Security, you get adjusted for CPI. You're actually fighting for adjustment for CPI. So if it's good enough for government, I mean, if it's good enough for the taxpayers, it should be good enough for government. But here's the thing. CPI is the metric that we actually use, but then they're like, you can't build bridges because concrete and steel go up higher than CPI. That's a different part of the budget. That's your capital improvement plan of the budget. I mean, it's kind of funny that Palm Beach County doesn't even know that you don't build bridges and build roads out of the general fund. That's a separate part of the budget. So I would question that, do they even know how their own budget works? But here it is. It's right here. I mean, heck, I might even take a selfie with it and send it to Abruzzo later. Are you press?
Wayne Washington with the Palm Beach.
How are you, sir?
Doing well, thank you, sir. No one in Palm Beach County, no voter in Palm Beach County elected you to oversee the county's finances. why should the voters substitute your judgment for the people they actually voted in to represent them? Don't you think they're smart enough, if they don't like the spending in Palm Beach County, to vote off the people that they voted into office?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The first thing I would say is that we have immense audit authority granted to us in the Constitution, that we can go and audit. We can look at any entity, either public or private, that actually gets state taxpayer dollars.
I'm not questioning your authority. I'm questioning why you don't trust the voters of Palm Beach County.
I trust the voters. I trust the voters when they are presented with information. The problem is that nobody from local government is going to willingly come out and say, hey, guess what, everyone, Palm Beach County, I just jacked up your taxes. I am wasting all this money. Come and vote for me. No, sometimes it has to take an outside voice in order to do that. The problem is that the taxpayers, unfortunately, are unrepresented and they're not taken seriously. How many times have you heard people in Palm Beach County, I see it online all the time, say that property taxes have gotten out of hand and the local government isn't doing anything? I'm their voice. Everyone in Tallahassee, everyone in government has lobbyists or government affairs people protecting their interests. You know, you have corporations have lobbyists protecting their interests. You have nonprofits out there protecting their interests. You actually have government themselves taking in property tax money from the people and actually lobbying against the people who are actually funding the government in the first place. Somebody needs to protect the taxpayers. I'm going to protect the taxpayers. They don't need to take my judgment. They just need to listen to numbers. I'm presenting them with facts. I'm giving them data that is coming directly out of their budget, and I'm saying that their governments are blowing past the number, inflation and population. These are what the numbers in. I am informing, I am educating, and it's going to be up to voters to make the decision based upon that information. But here's the key. That information was never given to them before. I'm always going to have the backs of the taxpayers every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Next question.
Do you feel what's happening here is criminal? You think some of these elected officials somehow should face criminal charges, or is that even realistic?
So if we go in and start doing granular audits and we start realizing that some local elected officials are doing anything with ill intent, misfeasance, malfeasance, or criminal, we will refer it over to FDLE in a criminal complaint, because they have a division up there that basically is public crimes. It's a public crimes investigation unit. But I will say this, is that a lot of what we're seeing is mismanagement of taxpayer dollars, and they are hiring people and they're giving raises and expanding government, which is not commensurate to the amount of growth that they're seeing. How does a budget go up $1 billion for an increase of only, how many people did we increase here? 76,000. How does it go up $1 billion for 76,000? If you were to put people away in jail for mismanaging taxpayer dollars, there would be nobody in Congress, because they would all be behind bars. Any questions? Any other questions?
You mentioned the raises and salaries. I wonder, are there other specific line items? I know you guys had the DOJ report a couple months ago that came up, and now that there's an updated figure, are there specific line items that fall under that is deemed as wages?
Yeah, a good question. The vast majority of the increase is personnel costs. Because before that, that was the largest. The largest cost of any organization, whether it is public or private, is going to be your personnel costs. So the amount of people that they're hiring to accommodate for an increase in population at 76,000 doesn't make any sense. So the vast majority of that is personnel costs. Any other questions? Appreciate you guys. Always looking out for the taxpayers. Guys, have a great day. God bless Florida.